Hey, Algebra 1. Today we're going to finish up our second half of our notes in our Springboard book on page 17. So make sure you turn to page 17 and we're going to go ahead and get started here. Don't forget, your homework the last time was to write and solve equations justifying each step with a property of equality like we saw on Delta Math. So if you have questions on that, make sure you send them to me. But let's go ahead and get started. Top of page 17. This problem right here says Julio has $5 more than Dan. And altogether, Julio and Dan have $19. How much money does each young man have? Okay, so we want to apply everything we've seen in our Springboard book so far, which includes writing expressions, replacing variables with values, and then solving equations. We're going to apply all three parts here for this problem. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple things. For number 6, it says let D represent the amount of money in dollars that Dan has. Use D to write an expression that represents the amount of money that Julio has. Okay, so a couple things we want to keep in mind here. First of all, we need to know that Julio has $5 more than Dan. Okay, that's going to help us. Okay, so for this one, for part 6, question 6 says let D represent the amount of money in dollars that Dan has. And we're going to use that to write an expression that represents the amount of money that Julio has. So if he has 5 more, that means we're going to take what Dan has, which is D, use my pen here instead of my highlighter. And if it's 5 more, that means we're going to add 5 to it. Okay? For number 7, write an equation to represent the problem situation. Okay? So without using variables, we know that the amount of money that Julio has plus the amount of money that Dan has to be equal to 19. But we want to write it with the variables here. Okay, so I'm going to write that over here. We know that Julio, like we saw in part 6, is whatever Dan is plus 5. And then Dan is right by himself. And then we know that that's going to be equal to 19. Okay, so once again, if we wanted to, we could put this in parentheses to represent what Julio has, but we don't necessarily have to do that. Okay? All right, on this page, I'm going to put the equation we wrote down for number 7 on this page. So here's what we want to have for number 8. Okay? We should have enough room to write this all out, but I want to make sure you guys have enough room in your pages to do that as well. Okay? So we have D plus 5, which is Julio's amount, plus what Dan's is, equal to 19. And this is the original equation. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I want to get ready to combine my like terms. So I'm going to switch these two around and write it this way. So D plus another D plus 5 equals 19. The property that allows me to do this is the commutative property of addition. Because remember, when we add numbers, we can switch the position of them at any time. Okay. Now, I'm ready to combine my like terms. My like terms in my equation are going to be this D and this D right here. We have 2 D's, we can add them together. That gives me 2D here, and the rest of the equation stays the same. So plus 5 equals 19. That is what we call combining like terms. And now we can start using our properties of equality to help us solve this equation. Okay? So in order for us to figure out what this missing variable is here, this D value here, we need to get rid of all of our positive or our plus and minus signs here. Okay? So in order to do that, I'm going to try to get rid of my 5 here. And the only way to do that is by subtracting 5 from both sides. So I'm going to subtract 5 here, and I'm going to subtract 5 on the right side as well. That's an important part of solving equations, is that I subtract 5 from both sides of my equation. Okay, and this is what we call the subtraction property of equality. Okay, so now Here we go again. We have numbers on both sides of the equation that we can go ahead and combine. That means we're going to combine like terms again. So 5 minus 5, that becomes 0. They go away because 5 minus 5 is 0. And then 19 minus 5 becomes 14. So we get 14 on the right side, and all I'm left with on the left side is just my 2 times d. Okay. Once again, we write this as combine like terms. Okay. Now, remember, this is 2 times d. Okay, so 2 times some number gives me 14. If I'm not sure what that is, I can go ahead and divide both sides. If I rewrite the equation, I can divide both sides, which is the inverse operation of multiplication, by 2. Once again, you can guess this is another property of equality. This is the division property of equality. Okay, so what happens is 2 divided by 2, well, any number divided by itself is 1, so these two are going to cross out. I'm left with d on the left side, and then 14 divided by 2 is just 7. We just say that we get to this conclusion by just simplifying. Okay, so now with this information here, we have a value for d. Without having to guess too much, we have used the algebraic method to solve a word problem, an equation here. Okay, so going back to our page here, looking at number 9, interpret your solution to item 8 within the context of the problem. Okay, so we know that d equals 7 was our solution. From this, that means that we know that Dan has $7. And then the other part of it is, like we see here in number 6, is d plus 5. So in this case, what number would be 5 more than 7? Well, that would be 12. That means that Julio has $12. Okay. Looking at the last problem here, number 10. Verify the reasonableness of your solution by checking that your answer to item 9 matches the information given in the original problem at the top of the page. So basically, we want to make sure that what we wrote down is still true. So that Dan's money plus Julio's money still equals $19. Okay, and here's how we can figure this out. We go back to our original. So d plus 5 plus another d there equals 19. We know that we're going to test the solution, d equals 7. Okay, so we get 7 plus 5 plus 7 equals 19. All right, combine the first two. 7 plus 5 is 12. 12 plus 7, does that still give me 19? You betcha. 19 equals 19, therefore we have the right solution here. Okay. All right, so I hope you guys have this all written down. Please send me questions if you have them. Okay, I know we're doing remote learning here. I know it can be tough, but your communication with me on how you're doing with all this is very vital. Okay, here's what I have you guys do for homework. At the bottom of page 18, you have these 4 problems right here: 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. They're very much so like what we've done. For 13, you're just justifying each step. Okay, the equation's done for you. You're identifying what each property is being used in each line. For number 14 and 15, you are solving the equations using the methods. You're going to state a property or provide an explanation for each step. Okay, so I would, for number 14 and 15, make sure you're using a separate sheet of paper. And then for 16 and 17, you're translating these word problems into workable algebra equations. All you're doing is writing and solving the equation, and then you're checking your solutions. No justifications needed here. I just want to make sure you guys are able to solve the equation just like we did in these problems. All right, guys, once again, make sure you're answering or asking any questions that you may have. I'll talk to you later.